I've used it. It's early, but
It is early.
So polite. I've used it. Substitute another word for early. I've used it. It's early.
Exactly.
You guys are
Yeah,
hilarious.
it's like a girl with a nice personality, right? You're like, well, it's early.
That was me when I was, dating in my 20s. Andy, nice guy, but it's early. Give him a couple decades, he'll be a decent boyfriend.
Come back for the second date in a year. See how
That's
he's
right.
matured.
Yep. All right, we got a special guest today, Paul Roetzer, the perfect man to talk to at the perfect time. This is going to be good. Paul, if you don't know Paul, he is a man who can see around corners and sort of knew what was coming long before a lot of us did. But originally, going way back, he's actually the founder of PR 2020. A lot of us knew him from back then, which was HubSpot's first agency partner, I think. He is an author, he's a speaker, he's a thought leader, and he's the founder of the Marketing AI Institute and MACON, the associated conference. We couldn't have found a better person at a better time. So let's welcome our guest, Paul.
All right, Paul, welcome to the show.
It is great to be with you.
This is
Plenty
fun.
to talk about, I'm sure.
And we're grateful for the time because just day to day, Paul's life, on a typical week, how many podcasts, how many media mentions, news shows, webinars, roundtables?
Yeah, I would say this week's maybe a little out of the ordinary, but I've done 9 presentations, including 2 workshops this week and 5 podcasts, I think, last count.
Have you been on the national news lately?
This morning, actually.
This morning.
Yeah, we were luckily the thing I try and avoid, politics. I got asked to be on a panel for AI and politics and misinformation and propaganda in elections. No lack of things to talk about there.
Well, we promise that won't come up today.
Okay. I had my fill this morning.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I was telling my wife about today, I was really excited about today, and I was like, I'm entering the fastest hour of my life.
So I felt for the last 7 months, every moment.
Yeah, I don't know. So I had you on the show, my business partner, about a year ago, and
Yep.
I came in there to literally talk about the remnants of PR 2020. You got into AI. We left that meeting and made like a massive, massive pivot all from one conversation with you.
That's awesome.
So it's really funny. So we felt like we were totally ahead of the curve on AI, everything from programmatic advertising to content writing. And I gotta be honest, when ChatGPT hit, it still put me on my butt. I did not see it coming. Not like that. Did you? You knew things like this were possible, but did it surprise you, or were you able to read the tea leaves that something big was coming when it landed?
Yeah, so since I started Marketing Institute in 2016, we knew language was what they were all trying to solve. So, Google had a major component of their research lab dedicated to it. We knew Microsoft had been working on it for 20 years. So we knew that what we were seeing the early remnants of in Google Smart Compose, where your Gmail was finishing your sentences for you, we knew that was just an entry point to learn how to generate language like a human. And that eventually would find its way into Google Docs, and it would write entire paragraphs and then entire articles. We just skipped the paragraph writing thing, basically. So we went right from Gmail and LinkedIn and Facebook recommending replies and text messages recommending replies to here's a 2,000 word article for you. So I think the speed at which it went from sort of 5 miles per hour to 60 miles per hour was somewhat shocking even to me. The thing that really changed everything for me was when GPT-4 came out, and it all of a sudden seemed to have very advanced reasoning capabilities, chain of thought, and creative outputs. And honestly, there's still a couple days a week where I'll see a use case for GPT-4 where I'll sit back and try and figure out how is it actually doing that. I understand how these things work. I know how they're trained, and I'm still sometimes in shock at how it's actually able to do what it's doing.
Yeah. But to me, it was weird because I felt like once that landed, within give or take 6 months, every single day is AI news, AI news, AI news, and it's not like little tiny shifts. We're talking about monumental news every single day. Like I'll tell you this about your podcast. So your podcast went from a fun to listen to thing to like I practically watch it live. Like the moment it drops, like
That's a fan.
yeah. Like
Well, I mean, the nice thing with the podcast is that honestly, like as you're saying, there's so much happens. And some weeks it feels like a year of AI news. And it's honestly like really hard to keep up with because the stuff we talk about is sometimes the obvious things, but like I'm reading like 3 to 5 AI research papers a week. You're following hundreds. Like it never turns off. Like you're just always kind of trying to process what's happened and what does it mean and what are the other people saying. And so the beauty of the podcast, and you guys know this with podcasts, like it's a forcing function to synthesize that information once a week. Because before we switched to that format last fall, we would just share it between ourselves and like pass it around and maybe we turn it into a blog post. But the podcast gave us the forcing function to say, no, once a week, we're going to stop and pick the 3 most important things. Then we're going to throw the rest into rapid fire. So, I mean, I'm glad to hear it's of value to other people. It honestly is a bit selfish. Like it's of enormous value to me and to Mike because it forces us each week to take stock of what's going on and what that means moving forward.
Oh, I think that's true for anyone who teaches anything,
Yeah.
right? Nobody runs up learning curves faster than content marketers because you got to teach that thing.
Yeah.
Especially if you're publicly, I mean, the fear of public failure is an insanely powerful motivator. So, how'd you learn GA4, Andy? I had a deadline, and everyone was going to see it, and enough people read it. I would have been embarrassed. So, yeah, I think that's the best way to learn something is to teach and commit to teaching something you don't know yet, and you will learn it very quickly. But thanks for all the synthesis. It's a great service the way you're putting it all together for us because we need a filter like you. So thank you.
Yeah, and I hope it comes across as like unbiased as possible. Like some of the stuff gets tricky, especially when we get into like AI regulation and things like that, and involvement in politics and election cycles.
Yep.
Because it's like, I mean, we did an episode, like episode like 48 or 49, that was all AI regulation because there had been like 4 meetings in Washington the previous week with Congress and the White House where they were trying to work on regulation and copyright issues and stuff. And I just remember on like Saturday telling Mike, like the whole episode next week has to be this. Like I don't really want to do it, but like we have to do something deep here. And I remember the moment I sent it to him, I was like, I regret this already because the reality was I knew generally what was happening, but I realized like this was going to be like cramming for a finals in college. Like I basically committed my entire Sunday to going deep into all 4 of the hearings. What were they about? Who were the players involved? So that by Monday morning when we record, I could talk from as authoritative a perspective as I could possibly do. But then I preface like, listen, we're not the experts on this. I am not in Washington. And so it's like, sometimes you're just trying to help people get further along, but without trying to necessarily take a side. And the regulation obviously has been one where people are always asking me, like, what do you think? What's the problem? And so, it's good. I mean, there's lots to talk about for sure.
Well, that brings up my biggest topic. Not my biggest topic. One of my biggest topics is that you shared something, and it took me down a rabbit hole. Is that there was a Google insider that published a paper, or it was leaked, that basically said that we, Google and ChatGPT, we really have no moat.
Yeah.
And while that has obviously ramifications for the players involved, what it always does to me is now that I see the biggest players talking about regulation, there's always that thing in the back of my mind that says, are they doing, like, I forget what it's called. It was on the All In podcast. He was talking about like regulation capture.
The regulatory capture, yeah.
Yeah. And so what's your gut on that? Because I know that there was some other people from Google that was like, if you think we have no moat, then you aren't paying attention. But
yeah, so I think there's 2 items to that. So one on the moat side is, again, from a technical term, or at least a technology term, it means like, is it a defensible position? Is the company defensible? Is the product platform defensible? And so what happened with how rapidly generative AI emerged, the question became, well, who does have a moat? Like if Microsoft and OpenAI can come after Google and their 93% market share in search, and all of a sudden there's fears that Google has to now change, and Andy could talk more about this than I can probably, but they're going to change the way the search results work. Questions start coming up around what's the impact on organic traffic and SEO, all because OpenAI and Microsoft threw a bomb basically into the search world and said, here, react, Google. And so that led to this question of, wow, if Google doesn't maybe have a defensible moat around search, like who has anything that's defensible? So there's that issue. Then there's the issue of these are potentially dangerous tools that can lead to misinformation, disinformation, propaganda at scale, synthetic content where we don't know what's real, the latest stuff of like existential threat to humanity, use in elections. Like there's all these unknowns. And so it's kind of odd that OpenAI and some other companies are so forthright in saying, regulate us. Like, come on, government,
know,
like help
yeah.
us. Like
Very strange.
protect us from ourselves. And that's where the regulatory capture thing comes into play. It's like what wasn't heavily publicly known was Sam Altman went out to dinner with a bunch of those senators on Monday night, like 2 days before the hearing, because you see he's kind of like chummy with them. That's why some people observe and say, this is regulatory capture in the waiting. This is the people who are going to be regulated becoming very chummy with the people who are going to do the regulation. And so then it becomes this question of, is this just a big PR stunt? Like, do these tech companies realize it's inevitable that they're going to be regulated? And so they figure, let's just go and be proactive in asking for it and then proposing ways to solve it that are maybe in our best interest. So I do think it's very likely there is some component of that. I want to believe that Sam Altman and some others do truly worry about the technology they're building. So you could say, well, then why are you building it? But I think there's a mix of things. But part of it is the government's going to, at some point, step in and do something. And they want to be able to have a seat at the table to figure out what that is.
I just feel like there's so much open source available that the cat's out of the bag. Like literally Andy and I were, before the show, he was just showing me platforms where zero guardrails.
Yeah. Yeah, you can download models that are uncensored and run them locally, and which, I mean, in theory, I guess it's ingested to the internet, so all that is data is out there somewhere, but it doesn't feel good to see on your screen the recipe for,
bad things.
napalm appear. Yeah, it's like not good. But almost more interesting than all of that, because this is a marketing show, is the big tech implication and disruption for search.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
unknown.
I have heard myself speak these words recently. Wow, Google has to catch up to Bing. I say that out loud now, and never imagined myself saying that out loud. But
and yet, I don't know if you know the stat, Andy, but I think the total market share shift is less than 1 percentage point since Bing came out with this generative AI. So that was my theory. So when all this happened, and I started getting asked the search question immediately. What I said was, I can't see a future state where organic traffic isn't impacted. It could be 1 percentage point, it could be 5, it could be 50. Like, I don't know, and I'm not sure that Microsoft and Google know. But I also felt like, at best, Microsoft ekes out 2 percentage points in the search market. Like, this isn't going to change, because the reality is, as incredible as Microsoft is at AI, as good of a company as they are, as deep as they are into enterprise businesses, the experience sucks. Like, generally speaking, like Google is infused into everything I do. I don't want to switch search engines. There's a lot of friction to change over. And the reality is, like, Google can catch up on the technical capabilities. So I just didn't see it rapidly transforming search in terms of, like, everyone's going to move to Microsoft and Bing. Plus, to, like, remember, is my Bing login my kid's Minecraft login? Or is it the Xbox login? Or is it the Microsoft Office login from the company I sold 3 years ago? I still don't know what I'm logged into when I'm logged into Microsoft. So I just thought there was too much friction. And eventually Google would release what they had, because they knew they had more powerful tech than they were showing, and they still do. So I think, Andy, again, you can kind of throw in here what you're seeing, but I think we're going to see a change in organic traffic, absolutely. I think we're going to see a change in what content is still found in search that leads to traffic. So what are you thinking? Like, I mean, you and I talked about this maybe a month or two ago. But.
Yep. Here's my perspective. There's an old research study. The research should be repeated, but it suggests that 80% of search queries are information intent queries.
Okay.
Person's looking for an answer, and so they go to search for the answer. But really, that visitor has information intent. But which of these searches really has visit website intent? So here's my perspective. We never really, as searchers, for 80% of the queries we all use every day, wanted to, click on a page, have a megabyte of data load, accept cookies, decline notifications and location tracking, and
No, I
dismiss
don't
a
want your
pop-up.
no, I don't want your newsletter.
Yeah, no, I don't want to. Yeah, get a rake to move all the pop-ups out of the way so you can finally see this like guacamole recipe. But someone's got like 10,000 words of their grandma's, story before the rest. Like, we didn't really have visit website intent to begin with.
Yeah.
And then you get retargeted for months. Like I think that website owners kind of, brought this on themselves by making a kind of a bad experience. In a lot of
Marketers
cases.
ruin everything.
Squeeze as much value. Yeah. So what happens? I think that in the end, if the answer is generated, is search the word? You were asking, and the answer appeared, but it wasn't as if you went look. It wasn't. I don't know if that's the right verb in a way. And weirdly, probably in the end, what will happen if it's a big disruption is that somewhere on your phone you're going to have just a personal agent that you use to get information that is created for you on demand, which is good enough. Never, I'm not expecting
Right.
perfect accuracy, but when we all adopt something that feels and looks and behaves like a personal agent, the company that makes that will end up winning. That will make all of search less important. It will, anyone who gets traffic from information intent queries, like any content marketer, will have less traffic to those. That's been happening ever since the featured snippet appeared, and ever since the people also ask box appeared. But we're all still going to visit websites for commercial intent queries. If you're making a decision about who to hire for a service,
B2B software.
Yeah, you want to look at those searches do, and that's 10% of all searches. Those searches do have visit website intent. So no, I predict a huge drop in traffic for information intent queries, and then big disruption in the long term for the platforms.
Listening to that, the one dark horse I've always said in all of this is, what if Siri actually did what it was supposed to do?
Oh my gosh.
Apple has
Right.
like 4,000 AI, ML engineers in their company. They never talk about anything they're doing with AI, and then they drop Vision Pro on us. But it has like 150 AI features baked in that they'll never talk about as AI features. Like, what if they're just building their own language model quietly in their labs, and at the next developer conference, they drop a Siri that's actually next generation that is everything you just said. And I never have to open the browser on my phone. I literally just hold the button down and say, hey, Siri. I don't want to turn Siri on, but I say, hey, Siri, and like off we go, and it works.
No
And
browser. No
Yeah.
browser required, right?
And then it takes actions on my behalf too.
Yeah. I mean, it is funny though, because I know you're an Apple guy. I'm an Apple guy through and through, but I have to laugh at just this latest conference that they had. Why it is very much cutting edge technology and stuff like that. The lengths they did to not say the word AI was. Did you catch on to that?
They've always been that way. They don't ever talk
Transformer,
about.
machine learning, all this stuff like that. And like literally, if you start to look at some of the iOS functionality, there's a lot of AI driven into that. They never say the word, and it's funny because
They also don't say metaverse. they avoid saying anything anybody else says.
mixed reality. Yeah, exactly.
Spatial computing.
Yeah,
They're differentiated. That's their brand.
it's funny. I mean, I mean, I don't live in a world where I'll justify a $3,500 pair of ski goggles, but I had to say that the technology was super, super cool. That's just not my world. Like, I can't see myself wearing them. It's just not who I am.
Yeah.
But when you did see the technology, you're like, well, maybe sitting down for a movie that's 100 on a screen. That's
My bet, if I had to put a bet down on this, I would guess by fall, Apple will probably blow people's minds with their language understanding and generation. And I think you're seeing the early signs of it. I don't know if you've noticed this, but if you use dictation on your phone through Apple, it's insanely good. Like 10x where it was 2 years ago, which means there's an underlying model that they're not talking about that's making it much better at understanding language and knowing what you're actually saying. So like go into, send a text message and use voice instead, and you'll see it for yourself. It's shockingly good, and it just happened in the last couple months. I noticed it. So I think that they're setting the groundwork. Again, they don't talk about it until they do it, and I think at some point Siri is going to, this year, I think it'll do something pretty amazing.
I talk about the idea, the concept of inflection points to a reader. Just basically imagine a straight line and it hits this bump in time and it dramatically goes in one direction or the other. And I think that AI was that inflection point. But the inflection point that I think is going to be the most monumental, because you can talk about ChatGPT being the most downloaded app ever. I think the biggest inflection point will actually be when Copilot and Workplace 14 come out, and average people that aren't using it to write rap songs about their cats and dogs and silly stuff, when they use it with daily ubiquity, if I'm saying that right, I think that's when the AI veil comes off and you're like, I think that's when it starts to get very real.
Yeah, if you want to convince a room of CEOs, which I've done this exact thing, so just like if you want to do this, go for it. Show them the Microsoft 365 Copilot 1.5-minute demo video.
Yep.
Yeah.
You don't have to say anything else. Just
know.
put that on for them and say, now you imagine marketing, sales, service ops, HR, finance, legal, the implications of this to your point. When all knowledge workers in your organization all of a sudden have generative AI capabilities and you have done zero training of what that means or how to use it or what they're allowed to do, or the implications of like, I'm going to do my usual work day, but I'm actually like not really working 8 hours anymore because I'm just using the generative AI tools you gave me and it's only taking me 6 to do it. It used to take me 8. I agree. I think that everything changes once Office, like Microsoft and Google unveil those things, if they work 80% as good as the demos. But like Microsoft just 2 weeks ago, their build conference and said, we're going to put Copilots in everything, including the Windows operating system. So Copilot isn't a single one-off thing. It's going to be the future of all knowledge work is going to be powered by an AI assistant. And that's a really hard thing to wrap your mind around.
Yeah.
Here again, I'm having that feeling like Microsoft is ahead. I sort of wish, I'm deep in G Suite, but I'm having
It's in
FOMO.
G Suite too.
It's
already in beta. It is.
It's in beta. I'm not seeing it.
Yeah.
I'm not
You
seeing it.
don't
I
have it
want
yet.
that.
I don't have it yet, but
You got to
it's
sign up.
yeah. There's people testing it right now. It's going to be their more advanced language model too. So you'll have it. It might not be as good, but the reality is Google likely has more advanced technology than Microsoft and OpenAI. I think that's a fairly safe bet. Whether or not they release it and how they choose to distribute it is really the kind of the $1 trillion decision they're currently evaluating. But they seem to have shown a willingness to be much more aggressive in the releasing, in part because they eliminated a lot of their ethical AI team that was maybe a barrier to this stuff. Microsoft did the same thing.
Speeds it up.
Yeah,
Really
you get
speeds
rid of
things
the
up.
people that are slowing down progress.
Yeah.
I'm not endorsing that, by the way. I'm just stating facts.
I viewed Microsoft as very offensively using AI.
Yeah.
In the fact that, like Google had a stranglehold on monetization. And, we were just talking a couple minutes ago about the future of search. I think that the powers will be, even where you can make this great utility, I think that they are going to do whatever they can to keep that stranglehold on monetization. So I think that search will exist only because the biggest companies in the world need it to exist, because that's how they make money. And so
but there's like, so the thesis here though is, like, you'll hear Sam Altman talk about this. You won't hear Satya at Microsoft or Sundar at Google talk about this, but Sam will. They think that AGI, so the next phase of AI where it becomes generally more capable than humans at most tasks, is a multi-trillion-dollar market. That everything changes once you get to AGI. Most of these major research labs think that they have a path to AGI. And so if you're making $500 billion a year on search and ads, but you think if you get to AGI first that it's a $2 trillion a year market, you're going to cannibalize your own market. And that's what Google hasn't been willing to do because there's no motivation to do it. My thesis is, I think Google might be willing to do some things in the business front that's going to catch a lot of people off guard. And the only way, because Satya is a very savvy CEO at Microsoft, very savvy. And you have to bring your A game. And I think Google knows that. And I think that they're going to be willing to do some things that are going to upset their user base, that's going to change the way we interact, but they're not playing to just maintain their search dominance. They're playing for what happens in business and society when AGI is real.
Well, in theory, it creates more opportunities for monetization because there's just more, if they put Copilot in everything, then you're in front of that tool more often. It's like seeing ads in Google Maps. It's like, wait, there's ads here too? It's like, if we all start using, a personal agent or, just, Copilot for all things, then I think that they're gonna be working hard on how to monetize that experience too.
Yeah. And we'll see that experimented with. Like you've seen demos of the new search function and where the ads are going to appear and how they're going to infuse them. I don't know that they all know. I think that they are racing into a future that they're forcing each other into, and they're all having to try and figure this out on the fly. I think we are going to be the guinea pigs for a lot of this, which wise I think you could see highs and lows moving forward in SEO and in marketing and web traffic, because there's not going to be a steady future state. It's going to be constant experimentation from the platform companies, the tech companies, and that's going to mean like they're going to wait to put some out for a month. It's like Zuckerberg does with Facebook. Like put something out unbeknownst to us, you're getting trial and error for A/B test something for a month, and then 3 months later we hear they were doing it. I think there's going to be a lot of that where they're going to be testing all kinds of user experiences. Andy's search function may look very different than mine, and they'll figure out which one's working. And I think it's going to be a very dynamic environment moving forward.
Yeah. We're already seeing it from ChatGPT because you are the lucky one, Paul, that has Code Interpreter. Andy doesn't have it. I don't have it. I know. I texted you yesterday, and you're like, go to settings. I'm like, Paul, I'm not that dumb.
I feel so bad because like I haven't even used it. I've had it for 3 weeks, and I haven't had a chance to use it yet. And I feel like I'm just like wasting the privilege apparently that I have of having it.
Andy's
you're
not going to see it
reader. I don't see it. I researched why I'm not seeing it. I've been looking into this thing. Paul, tell us, what is Code Interpreter?
So it's basically a PhD level data analyst is kind of the simplest way to think about it. You can give it data sets, you can give it spreadsheets, you can give it anything and ask it to analyze it, create visualizations based on it, find anomalies in it. So the use cases I have seen are things that, again, you would require PhD data scientists to do. You're going to be able to do through a prompt. And again, that right now it's a plugin in ChatGPT, but that is what is going to be baked into Microsoft Excel and Google Sheets, is this ability to truly do analysis and forecasting and modeling and visualizations in real time that the average person will be able to do if you know what to ask of it.
But then am I uploading, I guess not if it's built into G Suite and Office, but let's say I had it today, and I want to find correlations, but in my CRM data or something else. Risky, stupid, right? To upload a bunch of data directly into GPT-4.
Correct.
Custom trained models. Can you just highlight that for us? Because I don't think everyone is totally up to speed on the difference here between just using this in the browser to help you write an email and what the idea between behind a custom trained data model.
Yeah, so if you're using ChatGPT under the standard user agreement, they keep all of your data, and it can, in theory, be used to train the next version of GPT. So GPT-5 could, in theory, have the confidential proprietary data from your organization and part of its training data. So, the risk is there. Like, you're never going to get that past internal, like legal and IT. Like, they're not going to let you do it. Is it a high probability risk that some information you had leaks? We don't know. But I wouldn't be putting a customer list in there, that's for sure, or proprietary data. So, a practical way you could see this happening that did happen, I think it was at Samsung. This was like a pretty public issue. They took confidential transcriptions from internal meetings, put them into ChatGPT, and asked it to do a summarization. Well, that whole confidential meeting now lives within that foundational model. So yes, the basic guidance is if you're using a ChatGPT tool or Bard or whatever, you have to assume whatever you put in is not, they're going to keep as future training data, both the input and the output of what it actually creates. There is a way, I think ChatGPT, OpenAI, just a few weeks back announced a way where you can turn that off to where it will get rid of your data within 30 days and it won't keep anything after that if you tell it not to, but you have to tell it not to. So, realistically, right now, you're probably safer if you're trying to use this in an enterprise way in marketing or in sales, service, wherever, to work with an application level company like a Writer, Jasper, one of those organizations, where you have a different terms of use that you've agreed to, and they're keeping your information confidential, and they're building on top of these same models basically, so you can have access to the same kind of capabilities, but within an application company that has built like a user interface and enterprise grade solutions around it.
But there was a I'm looking at from TechCrunch on April 25th, but I haven't seen it in real life. But OpenAI previews business plan for ChatGPT launching with new privacy controls.
Yep, that's the one.
That's the one. Now,
Okay.
is that going to be literally a different subscription level? Like you're going to pay as a business to run it so they don't train the model on your data? Is that?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, you can turn off search history and
Yeah.
because I don't think the $20 a month version gets you that. I'm not sure. I'd have to go look.
Yeah.
Think about that for a second. Pay more so that our model doesn't learn from and remember you, right? Because it's a risk. This is our world now, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Like, is it worth? Should I give it a little more money to not save my stuff? Yes. Is it? Am I
Otherwise
breaking the
you're
law? Am I violating all of my, agreements with all of my clients by, Yes, you are.
Or is my agency that's using my data, that's using ChatGPT unbeknownst to me, breaking the law with my clients because I don't know that they're doing that with my data? I will say, like, this is an important note. I've said before, like, I think the LLM, the large language model, is going to be the equivalent to the CRM in the future. So as core as CRM has been to marketing, sales, service, I think the large language model will be that way. And so I think starting with larger enterprises, but it'll work its way down, every organization is going to have their own custom version of a large language model. You may do it through OpenAI. They're going to make a play there. Anthropic is a language model company that's raised a ton of money. Cohere just raised $250 million this week, it was announced. So you could go directly to these language model companies. You could do, Chris, I think you were wrestling like open source earlier. You can go to Hugging Face and get like a language model from there. But you're going to take some model and then you're going to train it on your proprietary data that no one else is going to have access to, and that's what's going to power your marketing. And so that's, I think, if we look out, it's so hard to predict future states, but like 2 to 3 years, I think you'll be behind the curve if you haven't built a custom trained language model that powers your marketing.
Yeah. I'd heard early on that Seth Godin had actually already done something similar.
He did a context thing. He fed it his book and his talks and stuff. But yeah.
Yeah. Now,
and you can do that. So like Anthropic. So what happens is these language models have no memory. So if you go in and have a conversation with ChatGPT and then you start a new thread tomorrow and you ask it something related to the previous conversation, it has no memory of it.
Right.
So it forgets. It like loses its context window, they would call it. So Anthropic came out with a language model a few weeks ago called Claude, where you can put up to 75,000 words of training data into a single prompt. So my last book is 60,000 words. I could, in the prompt, preset it to say, I'm going to ask you about the future of marketing. I want you to reply within the context of this book.
Yep.
And then it's trained on that book. So that's what's going to happen, except imagine that at millions of words or billions of words. So like, Bloomberg did this. They built Bloomberg GPT. They gave it 40 years of proprietary financial data, and they trained a model on it. And it's an internal tool, but now their entire employee base has infinite knowledge of everything ever published by Bloomberg that they can use in real time to help customers communicate with each other, find information, whatever it may be. And it's a chat interface, like Andy, like you were saying. It's just, hey, I need to know what happened in 1997, last time that this occurred in the economy. What did we say? What were our leaders saying? And it'll just be like, boom, it'll just like answer you. Okay, what did we do as a result of that? Find me any documents related to it.
Yeah.
Just like, Grog, that's the future of marketing and business. And we're like months away in some cases, or maybe a couple of years away, depending on industry and size of company.
Well, that one's live, you said, like those Bloomberg users
for
are using
them.
it. That
Yes,
is-
they're
wow.
yeah.
Just think of the value of this data becomes exponentially more valuable if it's that much more accessible. If your data analyst is built into it, like what could that mean? It's
It's hard to fit them, honestly. But
yeah,
it really is.
I mean,
Yeah.
the thing, but let's look at the upside.
Yeah.
That should speed up cancer research and all kinds of medical breakthroughs and like any
Huge.
kind of technology.
Already
like,
has.
Yeah. You're going to see. I had a conversation with a bunch of like healthcare executives recently, and the conversation was about AI. And what he said kind of stuck with me. He said, "What doctors do is basically a matrix of organs and symptoms. And you map the organ and the symptom to a cell and then go through the most likely, diagnoses there. That's not good human work. That's better AI work, right?
Yeah.
And AI would be far, far better at that. I don't know if we want doctors to do that first pass, human doctors to do that first pass of diagnosis. They should be there to check and to validate and verify and confirm and talk to you about it in a sensitive way. But we should see a big uptick in breakthroughs here in the next 2 years. Less.
Oh yeah, it's already happening. I mean, there was just even just this week, DeepMind, the research lab within Google, unveiled new technology that rapidly accelerated sorting and algorithms. Now it sounds kind of mundane, but it happens all the time within AI functions. Sorting is critical, moving data, categorizing the data. And so they found a way to speed up like 30%. And the AI found it. Like the AI created a mathematical formula that basically enabled this to occur. So yes, like in human biology, climate change, deep space research, like AI is being used in all kinds of sciences to accelerate discovery of things. And that to me, when I'm asked like what's most exciting, I'm with you, Andy. Like, that's what I want to see.
I know, it's great.
Yeah, make
You should be
life better.
excited. Let's celebrate. This is incredible moment in human history.
Yeah.
If we can set aside the dystopian views, but that's and labor market, but I don't know. I'm having a lot of fun with AI in two specific use cases. I'll run this by you. This is like an early notion. I can give it data and ask it to generate drafts of a persona and make a synthetic persona, and then talk to my persona about what its buying triggers are, what sent it looking for help, what content it likes, what it what's it hoping for and afraid of, and what words does it use.
Yeah.
That's great for research. Then my other, I think, if this is big, broad brushstrokes, my other use case for it is to train it to be me. And you give it a bunch of writing samples, like we said for Seth. Give it a bunch of writing samples, like you said, give it your book, like all these things. And then ask it to write things in your style or, with that kind of formatting or tone or topics and, create the summarization type tasks like meta descriptions and YouTube video descriptions and lots of other stuff. Feedback, thoughts. There's two uses for AI in marketing.
Like, I love that one. And
pretend to be your persona and pretend to be you.
Yeah, no, those are great ones. I think like Jasper and Writer, the two companies I mentioned earlier, like writing tool companies, they have the ability to do that. Like it's like out of the box where you can train it on your brand, your style, your voice. Because the example you just gave about being you, again, going back to how these things work, right now, each time in ChatGPT, you would have to give it that same information. Like, okay, here's all this information again. Or if like, I want you to write emails based on the emails that have previously worked, here's the 20 best emails we've sent based on performance data. You'd have to do it each time. What you can do with an application company, or where you'll be able to do an OpenAI in the future, is save a prompt. So you'll pre-prompt the system saying, use the AI Andy.
Right.
And it then knows to go pull from all the context you gave it about who AI Andy is. Like, I want you to answer this as AI Andy for me. And so it'll all be presets. So you don't have to do this every time.
Yeah, I'm trying to do that now. It's a little bit kludgy because I'm saving that chat, but the prompt sounded like this. Read these 5 emails that Andy wrote and summarize his style. Yeah. Copy, paste, copy, paste. These prompts are so big, I'm writing them first in a document and then moving them into GPT-4. And then so it summarizes the style with a short paragraph. Then my next prompt says, in the style of Andy, write an email promoting the following article. And then I pasted an article. It's, 60% good.
Yeah.
Well,
and you're going to be like, for public figures, so if you go and you give a prompt and you say, write it like Ann Handley, write it like, I don't know, who are some other good writers we know, like a Seth Godin, write it like you, it's going to write it differently. Like it'll, in theory, know who those people are, and it'll go and search all their writing, and it'll do it. So yeah, it's wild. I do think, like along your lines of the persona one, to me, the greatest value of GPT-4 that I'm still like daily finding use case where I'm surprised by it is as a strategy assistant. I mean, it's shockingly good. One example I like that's super tangible. So a buddy of mine's a dentist, and he had reached out to me at one point. He's like, man, I'm getting crushed. Like, inflation has my costs up 15%. I can't adjust pricing because it's controlled by the insurance companies. So profits just aren't what they previously were. There's nothing I can do about it. So I went into GPT-4 and I said, you are an entrepreneur, own a dental practice. Inflation is up, costs are fixed. What are ways you can use AI to maintain or increase your profit levels given this environment? And it came back with 10 really well thought out ways to apply AI. I sent it to my buddy. I was like, I'm not a dentist, man. Like you analyze these things. Tell me if these are any good. And he's like, dude, how did you do this? It's like 3 of these are things I never even thought about. So that kind of thing, which again, you and I are agency guys, Andy, like Chris, like what would we have thought to do? Like I would have had to go and say, what are trends in dental practices? What are the biggest cost items? What are ways you could drive? And you're talking about like, I don't know, 20 hours of work to get to that. Like, here's 10 things I would suggest you look at versus 10 seconds of work to develop a prompt and copy and paste it and send it in a text message to my friend and say, you're the domain expert. Figure out if any of these are relevant. Changes everything. Like, it's crazy.
I got to be honest, Paul, like the reason why I'm dying for Code Interpreter, we already have the document already pre-organized in our building. Like literally, it's like literally in the room behind me. And the moment it says go, I'm going to be able to ask things at a macro level across all of my clients and literally say, you know what, is this phenomenon only affecting my healthcare clients? And if so, is it my small healthcare clients, my medium healthcare clients, and my large healthcare clients?
Yeah.
Is there any correlation between this and my manufacturing clients? You know, what's we calculate like a lot of things about like how long it takes certain keywords of certain competition level to rank, and then okay, the domain authority in theory is all of this on these things. Yeah. Am I noticing any time longer for these keywords to rank for medium-sized clients? 100%. And to do that now is just, I don't know how to, I'd have to have a bean counter working full time.
Well, yeah, and I think to your point, like when I was running an agency, I mentioned strategy is the hard thing to teach, but data analytics. Like I wasn't hiring data analysts. I was taking, kids out of college, out of journalism and communications and marketing who'd never analyzed a spreadsheet in their life and asking them to advise clients on Google Analytics data and paid media data because we were generalists. Like we didn't have those specialists on staff. Yep. And now to your point, Chris, like you could now have data analysts on staff as long as you know what to ask it, or you go get a library of prompts that can help you extract information and knowledge from data sets. Yeah. That simple tool that's part of your $20 a month subscription could give you the power of PhD level data analysts.
It's crazy.
It changes what an agency can do. Or a marketing team for that matter.
Yep. I'll give you an example of a question and a prompt and an insight that can save any listener here, potentially save anybody tens of thousands of dollars. Which of our pay-per-click ads to which of our landing pages have far below expected rates of conversion from mobile devices? I could make that exploration for you. It would take me several long minutes of stumbling around inside GA4, and then we'd have the data, and then you would know exactly what to go do to optimize your Google Ads account. But when the day comes when you could literally just speak or type what I just said into a tool, and it just spits out a list of them, and then you can just immediately go suppress those ads and save a ton of money because you were literally wasting money buying mobile traffic that will never convert to pages that just don't perform.
Or have that run daily, and then every morning at 8 a.m. send to me the changes I should make.
Yep. But I mean, I think that's, well, so I love that at the per client level. I think that's amazing. And I think that ChatSpot, which is a plugin that's an alpha for HubSpot, is trying to do that already. I've used it. It's early. But,
it is early.
So polite. I've used it. Substitute another word for early. I've used it. It's early.
Exactly.
You guys are hilarious.
Yeah, it's like a girl with a nice personality, right? You're like, well, it's early.
That was me when I was, dating in my 20s. Andy, nice guy, but it's early. Give him a couple decades, he'll be a decent boyfriend.
Come back for the second date in a year. See how Stevie's matured.
Yep.
But the point I was trying to make is that, and it was something I always was frustrated with HubSpot about, is that every client was always siloed, and I always wanted to know macro information. That if I have this many clients and I'm doing the same exact protocols and doing the same exact process for all of these clients, if I find something out on one client, is that an anomaly? Is that client specific? Or, can I just literally do a prompt and say, this is the phenomenon I see, what other clients do this, what size, what industry, what vertical, do they have a point of contact? I know this sounds really weird, but the clients that we have we have a marketing individual who works there versus a CEO who does this on the side. you get dramatically different outputs for the people that are all in versus people that are spinning multiple plates.
And a practical tip for anybody who's watching or listening, if you watched any of the three of us use these tools, you would see a lot of prompts that start with two words you might not be using yet. I'd recommend these. You are.
Yeah.
Some of the best prompts in GPT-4, I recommend the new one, the better one, start with you are, because you are a data analyst with deep expertise in running regression models on blah, blah, blah. Like, do that first and then write your prompt. You're going to get a much better result. And also, by the way, don't expect that much from a single prompt. I know people who use this once and then judge it based on whether or not they liked the haiku. You haven't tried it yet. If you just used it to write some, write a poem for you, you have not yet used the tool. So those are tips for people who are new to this and just trying to keep it practical.
Yeah, I think on the kind of the prompting side, the way I always guide people is if you were giving a project brief to an associate or an intern, you wouldn't just say, go write me an article on this topic. You're going to provide context. You're going to provide instruction. Sure. How long do you want it to be? Do you want it, what format you want it in? And so I think the best way to think about prompting, even if you don't have the time or energy to go really look into the best current practices of how to structure and format prompts and the 6 items that should be included, if you just think about providing a depth of detail as you would to an associate with the expectation you're going to get back a really good first draft, you need to think about prompting in that same way.
Yeah, training, and then when I get a lot of value is in the subsequent prompt, which sometimes I literally just say try again.
Yeah.
Or just keep working on it. It's this is a lesson you can learn if you've ever played with Discord and Midjourney, and you sit there and you watch these people who are using AI for image generation, Midjourney. The UX is super weird because right now you have to use Discord, which is like this very noisy, originally a gamer chat platform. But when you're trying to use it, you're in a stream, so you're watching other people use it too, and it is detailed. The things that people put in to get out those great results are extremely detailed. You can watch them, just sit there and watch them. They're working very hard on those prompts. It takes a lot of work to create a beautiful image in 60 seconds.
I will say I saw an innovation in this space just yesterday morning. So I don't know if you all have tried Runway yet. They're Gen 1 and Gen 2, the image. Okay, so go get the Runway app, or you can go online and get the site. So I paid $28 a month. It's runwayml.com. It's images and videos. They also do some stuff with sound and stuff, but they do text to video. So Gen 2 is you give it a prompt and it gives you a 4 to 5 second original video. But the reason I say it just came out. Like it launched on.
No.
So we've known this was coming. They announced it on March 20th, and then it took a couple months to do this. So it's very early, very raw, but it'll double in its capability every 6 months moving forward, probably. So, but the reason I say this is in the app. So there's an iOS app. You can download the Runway app and connect it to the phone, the images and videos in your album. But you can go in and create a prompt. And I went in and I was like, I always struggle with, what is my first prompt? There was a GPT-4. I sat there at dinner by myself. I'm like, this is my first prompt. It's got to be good. So the same thing with Runway. I was like, this is my first video. It's got to be good. And I was like, what is something amazing? And I was like, okay, my wife and I went to Santorini, Greece years ago. The sunset on the coast on the tip of the eye. And like, that's what I want to see again. And so I gave like a beautiful sunset off the eastern end of Santorini or something like that. And at the bottom, it suggested 4 enhanced prompts of the prompt I wrote. So it did the prompt crafting for me.
Yeah.
And I looked, I was like, oh, wow, that's a much better prompt than what I had. And then I picked the one it had. And it was like 20 additional words. So I think that's what's going to happen with all prompting is you're going to actually see this interpretation of what you really mean and what it knows will optimize the output. And it'll either just replace your prompt unbeknownst to you with the more advanced prompt, or you'll choose that more advanced prompt.
Yeah.
But yeah, you got to play around with Runway. You'll freak out. It's insane.
Have you seen that meme where it was the bad guy from Princess Bride who had 6 fingers on his right hand? Mm-hmm. So like, I don't know that you know this or not, but one of the hallucinations that all of these softwares have is that they draw the guy perfectly and he's either hands or got 6 fingers or he's cross-eyed. And it was just like all of a sudden the bad guy from Princess Bride is everywhere. And just this collage of beautiful pictures, but it's like, yeah, he's got too many fingers.
The hands. Yeah.
Yeah, they're getting there with the hands thing. They've largely solved it, but it is still an issue in some of them.
Yeah, that's so funny. Though. Yeah, yeah. We got about 10 more minutes. I got to ask you a question about what I believe that the future is going to be here. So, I think we talked about the inflection point about adoption with Copilot and Google, and we also talk about if money was free like it was 2 years ago. Would this have just been, you know what I mean, like from a venture capital standpoint? Are you finding that the right companies are actually getting the money for this? Or do you, because if this happened 2 years ago, this would have been a powder keg.
So, I mean, you have to be an AI company to get venture funding right now, generally, in the technology space. Like, if you don't.
Yeah.
So, right when ChatGPT came out, so I've always been preaching AI for a really long time. And there were definitely some organizations that I assumed were doing more with AI than they were just publicly acknowledging, and that at some point we would just hear about all the amazing things they were doing. Then ChatGPT came out and I started getting the phone calls from these companies, and I realized that they in fact hadn't done anything, and they didn't really realize what was about to happen. So what I started telling venture capital firms immediately was, you have to right now go audit your entire portfolio of SaaS companies, and you have to find out who on those teams understands what's happening right now and can build a roadmap for a smarter product. Because if they don't, they're going to get run over. And then do not spend another dime of investment dollar into a company that doesn't have someone on board or a team on board who understands this moment and what's about to happen. You cannot build product the same way you built it yesterday. So that was my guidance, is like immediately the SaaS industry got flipped upside down. And so you saw a lot of people that maybe were going to get funding, getting their term sheets pulled. You had a lot of people who just got funding, whose VCs were now questioning the decision they had made, because did ChatGPT just obsolete a bunch of these companies that were getting funding? Because again, generative AI existed before ChatGPT. There was plenty of funding going into generative AI companies. But ChatGPT made it to where these things could be obsoleted really quickly. Yeah. So I think now we're in this phase where VCs are sitting on the sideline with massive amounts of money because they don't know, go back to earlier, where the moats are. They don't know which companies are defensible. The assumption right now is two main factors, data and distribution. So if you're a software company that has tons of proprietary data or a massive user base or both,
right,
you have a much better probability of surviving and thriving. So I think of Grammarly as a great example here.
Grammarly was, you said,
Grammarly was in AI, but they didn't do generative AI until like March or April. But they have 30 million customers. So they can show up late to the party and they have distribution. They can all of a sudden have 30. So that's what I think about with this space. And I don't know. If you look back at the economy, it's obviously been a challenging economy, and people were tight with the money, and they're even more tight now. And I think a lot of the VCs and private equity firms are just trying to figure out where to make their bets, and it's hard.
Yeah, because they're losing almost everywhere else too. So it's whatever move they make, I believe they have to make the right move.
Well, they know the next Google, the next Tesla, the next Meta, like they're gonna come out of this economy. Like you're gonna have $1 trillion companies that don't exist yet that are gonna emerge, and that's what VCs do. It's like, we can get 9 bets wrong, but if we get the one right, and so they're trying to figure out where those bets lie, and they're not. The next NVIDIA isn't showing up anytime soon, so if you missed out on that one, although I'm not so sure that it still hasn't plenty of time to get in on NVIDIA. Their demand's not going anywhere for their chips that are powering this whole thing.
Yeah.
Well, an important point there. I mean, there are people who think that it's that they're behind, and sure, but it's only months. I mean, this is still so early. I saw, I should have written it down. Someone said something like, people overestimate technology in the short term and underestimate it in the long term.
Yeah.
This is like waking up, the alarm went off, waking up in the morning, having breakfast. That's where we are on this path. Anybody who has any ideas for starting something, building something, trying something, research, I mean, the people I worry about are the ones who, and they can change in a minute if they wanted to, but I talk to two kinds of people who are excited and experimenting. Everyone's a little bit anxious.
Right.
And people who are waiting. I know a lot of waiters. They're like, oh yeah, I think, I don't know what's on the product development life cycle for my tools, but when they come out with something, I'll give it a try.
Hype cycle.
Really?
Hype cycle.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think it's a good time to wait.
No, I wouldn't be waiting.
No. Yeah.
No, don't be a waiter. Don't wait. Try, okay, so Paul, you recommended it 8 minutes ago. I'm looking at a beautiful 4-second video of a motorcycle jumping over an explosion in Runway.
Jeez.
Watch
I
the
did
demo.
that with-
go to
I-
YouTube and do the Runway, the Gen 2 like trailer when they first announced it. It's a minute and a half, like it'll blow your mind.
Jeez.
Yeah. So I don't. No one had to tell me, twice to try a new tool or to see what's possible, or to at least just so I'm aware, even if I'm not, drastically changing my workflows or plans or anything yet. It helps if you're anxious about these things, dear listener. Start just look around, start playing with them, see the edges, right? The limitations.
Yeah.
You'll feel better. You'll feel better just knowing that you're not being completely left behind or run over just by being aware of what's possible. It's fun. I mean, it should be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things that I always kind of consult is when you look at your business, you try to figure out where is that new line, because the line has moved. So where will that be, that interaction point where the technology stops and the personalization starts? Because it might have been in the middle at one point. Now the AI just took a big bite out of not personalization, but the personal customer service or with all that special human touch. But that doesn't mean that it's gone. It just has moved. So you have to, my suggestion is always to just figure out, hey, you know what? When the technology advances to a certain point, what's that first interaction point where the technology is going to talk to a human and the human has to respond? And that is where you want to focus your time and your energy, because it's going to be really, it's not, what's the guy's name that it's the fable that the guy who did all the railroad stuff. It's like not Paul Bunyan, but what's the guy's name? Patrick Henry.
Yep.
Patrick Henry?
Yeah.
Yeah, you
That's
know,
right.
Paul Henry.
Paul Henry. Sorry, yeah. Whatever.
Another Paul.
Yeah, but I'm just saying you're not going to be able to compete with this technology one-on-one with your old methods. It's just not going to work. Like you're 2 to 3 years away from companies dying if they're literally going to just go and fight against this thing. You have to adopt it and adapt.
And I tell people, if it scares you, it's for you. You're the user that can benefit from it today, right?
Yep.
If you think that, it's going to replace my job, but that means that the tool is this free, super powerful, most advanced technology ever created that you can access in 2 seconds, can benefit you now. Will AI replace marketers? Who said this? AI won't replace marketers per se, but marketers who use AI will replace marketers who don't use AI.
I think I may actually be to blame for that one.
I'm going to quote you. That will be forever attributed to you.
I actually took it from a 2018 radiology study. So there was a belief that radiologists would be obsoleted by 2018. And that was actually a Stanford radiologist that said, I won't replace radiologists, but radiologists use AI, replace radiologists don't. So I adapted that to be marketers, writers, engineers, whatever.
Yeah,
I'm glad to know.
And it just sort of took a life of its own. And I almost regret that I did it.
No, it's an important message because it's what causes anxiety is hopelessness, with nothing to do, with a dead end.
Correct.
But this is not a dead end. It's a path forward. It's branching paths in front of us all. So I think
hope is a good message to really leave with people, because there's crazy parts to this. It will go wrong. It's going to create some negative ramifications in society and education and business. Like there's no debating this stuff. Like it's going to have its problems. But the way I look at this is, if we rewound to like 1993 and we said, oh man, the internet's going to have a dark web. Should we create the internet? Like it's going to enable people to do all kinds of crazy things on social media and put people in depression, and like all these bad things are going to happen. But do we create the internet? Like do we commercialize the internet and make it available publicly the way we did? Probably 100 times out of 100. Like and that's what I feel AI is like. Yes, it's going to have known and unknown ramifications, but so much amazing can happen from it, and life can get better, and humanity can move forward, and scientific discovery, and like you just have to do it, and then you have to figure out along the way. We're adaptable species. Like we figure out how to evolve. Yeah. So I'm very optimistic about the future.
I have young kids. Andy and I, our kids are around the same age. Well,
Paul's
you have a daughter,
too.
right?
11 and 10. Yeah.
11 and 10. Yeah, 7 and 5.
Yeah.
And, you know, I was talking to my dad and I was saying, and I've used this analogy before, is saying, in 1903, the Wright brothers basically were flying 10 feet above the ground, and it was like the miracle of flight. And then 66 years later, we're on the moon.
Yeah.
And like the things my dad got to see, and I'm like, the things that my kids will see, like that 66 years could be 3 years. I mean,
I just put something on LinkedIn the other day. It said, I graduated high school in 1996, which was 27 years ago. 2050 is 27 years from now. And those 27 years are like a blink of an eye to me. Like, I mean, it just seems like yesterday. So yeah, the thought of like, and I went through all these companies that have been created since 1996, all these technologies that have been invented since 1996. And I was like, what could we be in for in the next 27 years? Like, it's really hard to sit back and imagine, but it's exciting to think about too.
Yeah. Yeah. Robots in your house in 3 years, according to Elon, right? So we won't have to do any chores.
Elon tends to overpromise. But speaking of like short-term, long-term thing, I have full self-driving. It is not full self-driving. Ironically, I was actually thinking on my drive home today, I was like, if he would have just called autopilot Copilot, none of this would be an issue. It's an amazing Copilot. It is not full self-driving. Like, it's horrible at it. And I feel like that's kind of where we're at. It's like, we just want that Copilot. I just want the assistance of the AI.
This is so cool.
Paul, thank you.
Yeah,
thank you.
This is great.
And I love the way it ended with a kind of a message of hope and realistic expectations and optimism about the future. So thrilled you made the time. I don't know anyone who's busier than you right now.
Anytime.
Hold on. Give me the plug. You got Macon coming up. Give me the plug.
We do. Marketing AI Conference is July 26th to the 28th in Cleveland. Macon.ai, MAICON.ai. Yeah, we're looking like 600-700 people maybe at the convention center in Cleveland. Same place as Content Marketing World, if any of you all have been to Content Marketing World.
I'll be there. If anyone listens to this and buys a ticket, email me, Andy@OrbitMedia, and I will buy you a beer. That's my promo
I'm emailing
code.
you.
Woo!
I'll take that.
Let's get beers. Wednesday night, 26th.
do it.
I'll be there. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
Yep.
you, guys.
See you next time.